Hey everyone, this is Pastor Jerry, and we're going to continue our devotions today. And specifically, we're going to look at faith, or the promise of faith. And we're very quick as we go through our spiritual walk to tell others when they're struggling or when they're going through a difficult time in their life. You just got to have faith. And we say that to quote unquote encourage them. And a lot of times we say it so frequently and we say it so casually that it almost becomes like a cliche. You know, we just kind of spurt it out there and throw it out there because it's an easy thing to say. And we are encouraging, but it's also to say, it's one thing to say, you got to have faith, but it's another thing to do it, because faith is, we struggle with that quite a bit. You know, and Jesus talked to his listeners and to his disciples about their struggle with faith. And in Matthew chapter 8, he talks to his disciples after he calmed the storm, and he asks them this question: why were you afraid? And then he says, you have so little faith. And then to Peter, after he reached down and brought him, lifted him up out of the water, when he was trying to walk on the water, he doubted and began to sink. And he told him very specifically, that you have so little faith. Why did you doubt me? And two key phrases there, two key words in those statements are doubt and fear. And that's really where we struggle in our walk of faith. But in Romans chapter 10, it talks about faith and about the great promise of faith. And beginning in verse 1 of chapter 10, it says, "Dear brothers and sisters, the longing of my heart and my prayer to God is for the people of Israel to be saved. I know what enthusiasm they have for God, but it is misdirected zeal. For they don't understand God's way of making people right with himself. Refusing to accept God's way, they cling to their own way of getting right with God by trying to keep the law. For Christ has already accomplished the purpose for which the law was given. As a result, all who believe in him are made right with God. For Moses writes that the law's way of making a person right with God requires obedience to all his commands. But faith's way of getting right with God says, don't say in your heart, he will go up to heaven to bring Christ down to earth. And don't say he will go down to the place of the dead to bring Christ back to life again. In fact, it says the message is very close at hand, is on your lips and in your heart. And that message is the very message about faith that we preach. If you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is by believing in your heart that you are made right with God, and it is by openly declaring your faith that you are saved. As the Scriptures tells us, anyone who trusts in him will never be disgraced." And so we look at that, and we hear that, and Paul said, "My prayer for the people of Israel is that they would be saved." It says they had an enthusiasm or a zeal for the things of God, but they also had difficulty with one aspect of it. They believed in their ability to keep the law. They believed in their ancestry. They believed in all that they could do to get right with God. It was up to them. And so they knew how to be religious. They knew how to sound religious, and they knew how to walk the walk and talk the talk. But they didn't really have placed their faith in God as they should. They placed their faith in themselves. And it somewhat sounds like some of the people in church today. But Paul begins to tell them that Jesus had already accomplished all the things that are laid out in the law. And he tells them very much that it wasn't in their ability, but what God had done for them in and through Christ Jesus. It says that it's your faith in Jesus, not in yourself, that you're saved. And I love very specifically what it says when you look at verse 9. It says, "If you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." What a promise of faith, that I need to declare Jesus is Lord, that I need to believe in my heart that God raised him from the dead. It says, then I will be saved. It says, for believing in your heart that you are made right with God, and it is by openly declaring your faith that you are saved. So it's not me and what I do. It's not me and what I say, but it's placing my trust, it's placing my belief, it's placing my faith in Jesus. I confess that Jesus is Lord of all. I confess that God raised Jesus from the dead, that he died for me, that he rose for me, that he lives for me, and yes, that he's going to come for me in the future. It says, by this you're saved. It says, by believing in your heart, we're made right with God. What a rich promise. What a great promise. And so the promise of faith is this: you will be saved by placing my faith, by placing my trust in the truth. God bless you. And put your faith and your trust where it needs to be. Jesus.